Welcome to Mo Banshee's Lair. This show has been altered to conform with YouTube's rules on copyright. The music has been removed in some of the commercials. I hope you enjoy it, and God bless you and yours.
Toto? I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Welcome to Mo Banshee's Lair, rocking your world on DreamStreamRadio.com.
And welcome to Mo Banshee's Lair. Tonight we have a good friend of mine, Dr. Joseph Resnick. He is a scientist. He is an amazing man. I opened our show with Something's Gotta Give by Fred Astaire because today is Fred Astaire's birthday. He passed away in 1987, but the guy was some hoofer. And I picked his music tonight because, growing up, that's who Gene Kelly, all of these guys, we watched them on the $1 Million Movie and everything else. We grew up with these guys. And a tip of the hat tonight to Fred Astaire. One of my favorite books was War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. And then, of course, the movie with Anne Robinson. And hi, Anne, I love you. Came out, the movie, and Earth was almost destroyed. The extraterrestrials come and they beat us down and almost have us whipped. And this tiny, tiny little germ comes around and kills the bad guys, the extraterrestrials, and all is well. Well, that's a make-up. In the Irish, it's in make-up. It's not true. It was something H.G. Wells envisioned. It was a story he created in his head. But we are very much in that battle right now. And our only recourse, the only thing that might save us is a tiny, tiny little insect. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to be talking about Bigfoot, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff tonight, because tonight our guest is Joe Resnick. Welcome to my lair.
Good evening, Mo. Thank you so much for having me on as your guest this evening. Joining me will be my partner, my business associate and research associate, Miss Joy Mann. And
Hi,
we
Joy.
have lots to tell about the bees, our research, our transition from the tropics to from the island of Borneo, Madagascar, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, and we brought that research back here to the United States, and we're adapting that now to the mellifera, which is a common name for the honeybee that everybody recognizes as the European honeybee, which is not native to the United States, by the way.
It's not indigenous, no.
No, it is not. They were brought here by Sir Francis Drake, first known by Sir Francis Drake. However, there is a body of evidence that suggests that the Spaniards brought them here, but not the European bee. The Spaniards brought tropical bees. So there's a whole body of evidence. But I guess I wanted to start tonight, again, by thanking you, Mo, for having us on the show tonight and presenting us the opportunity to tell you about our research, about our company, our Manco, RMANNCO.com, that your listeners can go, and there's a whole bunch of links on there that talk about the Carolina Bee Food Company, which is a brand new entity. And here's something, Mo, was hard for me to believe. When we set up the Carolina Bee Food Company last year, in the whole history of North Carolina, there's never been anybody that makes bee food in North Carolina. And North Carolina prides itself on its honey. This is one of the largest honey-producing states in the United States, if not in the world. Some of the finest honey comes right here from North Carolina, and they're real sticklers about it. I mean, these guys from the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, I mean, they're real sticklers about it.
Right.
And they work very closely with the Department of Agriculture, USDA. I got a bunch of clocks here that are going to go off. I apologize.
Yeah.
I'm a clock freak. I like to know.
I know. I wanted to talk about that later.
Yeah. Well, I like to know what time it is in different places where we have research projects going on, and I have each one of the 23 different chime clocks set to go off at different intervals so that I know what's happening at this particular place and that particular. It's just one of these little nuances about me that people tolerate. But
you mean Joy?
And others. We have a lot of people that come in and out, and my partners, when I'm on the phone, always on the hour, I have to stop everybody and say, "Excuse me for 30 seconds," and then all the clocks go up, and it sounds like the Swiss Time Museum in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland. They all go off at one time. It's beautiful, really beautiful.
Yeah.
But we launched the Carolina Bee Food Company, and our first product is being tested by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and labeled. We call that Grex Bee Food, and that's actually a spin-off of the artificial pollen product that we developed when we were in Malaysia. Prior to going to Malaysia, we made a synthetic pollen that is 10 microns in size with the encapsulation instrument I developed when I was working for NASA as part of the STS-41, STS-43 schemes and programs back in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And we took a batch of that over, and we knew we were going to be there during the monsoon season. Now, imagine, if you would, the monsoon season is equivalent to our winter time here, where forage for the animals, for bees, it's very, very scarce, if existent, if at all extant. So what we did, we planned particularly to be there in Borneo, in Sumatra, and in Malaysia and in Indonesia during those time periods, so that we could actually use our product and see how these bees would uptake these very, very small bees. I actually worked with 5 different species. There are over 66 different species that we know about, probably more, that have been identified there in Southeast Asia. There are over 66 species. We worked with 5 of them. 2 of the 5 were very aggressive. 3 of the 5 were very, very docile. So we selected those three species to domesticate. So we actually started a program there in Indonesia, in China, and in Malaysia to create infrastructure that dealt strictly with production of honey using the stingless bee. And it has since blossomed over the last couple of years, where it is now an industry. And I got to tell you, I'll be honest with you, the finest honey I've ever tasted, and when I use my Brix index meter, the best honey that I've ever found on the face of the planet. And one of my big things is I take this Brix meter with me everywhere, and if there's honey around, I check the honey to check for moisture content, sugar, salinity, 5 different parameters. Yeah. The best honey in the world, Borneo. I'll tell you why. No pesticides. Yeah. No pesticides of any kind. First of all, it's so remote there, the only way to get there is by boat, okay? Or else they fly over and they push you out of the airplane with a parachute on, literally. And that's how you get there. So there's no pollution, and very few people. I mean, you have the indigenous populations there, and you have the Orang Asli populations there who are indigenous peoples, but you don't have the contamination that the foreign manufacturers are bringing in. So consequently, the agricultural products coming out of there are absolutely pristine.
Let me interrupt for a second. I have a saying, and it annoys my family. I said, but we shit in our own bed. We have used pesticides without considering, it gets rid of mosquitoes, but it also kills bees. It makes birds sick, so they can't lay eggs. Pesticides are killing us, but we don't see it because we don't see the littlest, the first in line that get killed, and that's insects.
The pollinators.
Right.
We're very big on pollinators. Joy is a champion of the pollinators. And Joy, chime in on this. You're saying is what? We rescue the pollinators, or we rescue the bees.
Yeah, we rescue the honeybees. You know, people say save the bees, save the bees. Well, we're more rescue.
Yeah, we're more into rescuing them because people saving them has not worked. So our approach, we developed a little bee box that we're trying to make available to the U.S. Department of Agriculture and to the fisheries and game people, where we provide a small box with our bee food in it, discounted rate, of course, okay? And our hope is that they would put these bee boxes for all pollen, and our bee food can be used by all pollinators, and pollinators include ants, bats. I don't know if you know bats are pollinators. Flies.
Hummingbees are pollinators.
Yeah. Well,
hummingbirds.
Moths. Butterflies. Just about anything that moves from plant to plant can be considered a pollinator. Well, one of the projects that we have is to make these little bee boxes, and we call it Bee Feed ER, which is the bee food emergency room that we want to put out there in all of the national parks, in all of the cities and counties. And of course, we make them out of paper, so they're very inexpensive, about 7 cents a piece. And our bee food is very inexpensive. A pound of our bee food, of course, it's depending on the cost of beeswax. Our bee food is made with beeswax, and we take the beeswax and we make microscopic-sized balls out of the beeswax, and then we put our artificial nectar and pollen mixture inside this microscopic little ball. The ball can range in size from 10 microns all the way up to 500 microns, whatever size we want to make it. Generally, we stick between 10 microns and 25 microns. And that's because it's easier for the bees to handle. You know, one of the things, I'll just share this with you. We went to a bee meeting, and I'm not going to say where or who was present, but these were the bee honchos in the bee world, beekeeping world. And I queried one of the guys, chairing the seminar about the size of the jaw on the honeybee. And he said, well, quite frankly, I don't know. And this guy is, Professor Emeritus.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I know what it is. He said, well, quite frankly, we never had anybody inquire or never had a need to know. And I said, well, I had a need to know because I needed to know how far their jaws could spread so that they could bite this little ball and release the nectar inside. But that was quite shocking, not only to me, but to the body that was present in the body politic, that this fellow didn't know the size of the jaw.
That's because they get wrapped. Their heads are wrapped around looking at, okay, the bees are dying. Why? And then, of course, they come up with all there's what do you call it, mold, and there's this and there, and pesticides. And the bottom line, you are what you eat. Well, what can they eat? And how much can they eat? And that kind of thing doesn't click at first. They're too busy trying to find a big smoking gun instead of looking for a little tiny smoking something, Yeah,
what we found, and I've been reluctant to publish this. I have a paper that is in with Chloridod right now, and I've told them don't publish this. But here's what we found. Okay, our researchers have found, in combination with these pesticides, a large degree of pollution and loss of colonies is due to the lack of cleanliness on the part of the beekeeper. Now, I just poked a lot of beekeepers in the eye, and I don't mean to do that, but by the same token, I'm not going to hide findings. This is what we find. What our research has found is that probably as high as 60% of hive loss is due to the fault of the beekeeper. And that's
unintentional. It's just a matter of
unintentional.
It's education. Really.
Yeah, and lack of cleanliness. You've got to keep that hive clean.
Right.
Cross-contamination is real easy. It's even happened to me where, quite harmlessly, a person has given me a sample of a new product to try in my hive. And I thought, you know what, this is really good because the hive can use this. It will help with temperature, and by the way, you need 96 degrees inside the hive to make honey, just in case somebody wants to know. If the temperature inside the hive's not 96 degrees, you're not making honey. Anyway,
Right.
the person gave me this sample of this product, and I was tickled pink to use it, and it worked very well. But guess what? It was contaminated with hive beetle larvae.
Ooh.
And but we lost about $20,000 worth of bees. So the lesson there to all beekeepers listening: never take anything from anybody and put it in your hive that you didn't make yourself and you don't know. It's absolutely 100% yours and clean, because you will lose your hive. But we were doing some studies again with the Melipona, the stingless bee, and we found something interesting that I'd ask Joy. Joy, share this information about the orchids. Now, there are stingless bees. Of course, the Department of Agriculture will tell you, no, there are no stingless bees in Florida. Joy, tell a story about the orchid.
Well, the vanilla orchid will not produce the vanilla bean unless it is pollinated by the stingless bee.
By the Melipona.
If you do not have the Melipona stingless bee pollinating that orchid, it will not produce the vanilla bean.
Every other type of pollinator is too large to access the stamens and the pistil in this particular species of cotyledon. So the stingless bee, now I don't know what species it might be. It might be Masidica. I'm not sure which species it might be, but or it might be Minima. It'd probably be some species of Minima. But we have them in Florida. But, I wanted to go there and study them, but the Department of Agriculture says no. We're not going to let you study stingless bees because there aren't any. And then I've had some, back and forth with guys here in North Carolina because I put forth a proposal to do a study to search for Melipona. Because this is tropical here in North Carolina. Parts of our state is tropical.
Right.
And, if those bees exist in Florida, it's only 300 miles.
We have colleagues who have attempted to bring them into the country, and
right.
They were alerted ahead of time, do not bring them in the country, or you will be arrested. So. Yeah,
I don't want to go through that stuff. I don't want to, go the same way of the guy who brought the Africanized bees in. So,
right.
But we still have ongoing studies abroad in China. Joy and I spent some time there in Jiangui or Guingzhou. Joy's good with the names and the scheduling and the places and stuff. Me, I have an aversion to black chicken feet. So Joy handles all that stuff. But no, we've continued with our research. We began studying the Melipona in Malaysia when I was in residence at the University of Malaysia in Terengganu, and we continued those studies to the end. I actually had 5 different research projects that we commenced and culminated there in a very short time period. In a time period of just 9 short months, I was able to produce 6 technical papers and publish those papers and bring 3 of the 5 projects to fruition. I was asked to stand down on the other 2 projects that involved things that weren't consistent with the department.
Right.
They were different projects, different outcomes.
Let me ask you something. You're studying this. The bees in Europe, are they under the same distress as the bees here in the United States?
Not as much, because most of the European countries have already banned. There's a chemical list. Believe it or not, the European Union is ahead of the United States when it comes to banning pesticides and
the neonics.
Yeah, the neonics and that sort of thing. They've already been banned. So they don't have as much trouble, but, it's hard for me to forgive the contamination that, actually, in my opinion, just my opinion, I'm probably wrong, and if I am, I'll retract it. It all started with the infestation of the Isle of Wight. They brought this stuff they brought tracheomites, varroa mites into the United States. We didn't have them. We didn't have them. And my colleagues in Malaysia swear up and down there are no trachea and varroa mites. And just before we left Malaysia, in the Borneo Free Press came a report that the Malaysian Navy had captured a ship that came from China, and it had steel cables on it, and inside the rolls of the cable were melipona infected with trachea and varroa mites. So
Yeah.
that's how easily this infestation kind of stuff.
You know, when somebody tells me it couldn't possibly happen, I call them a jerkoid or a jerkette, depending on if it's a male or a female, because that's how we've got everything. Everything was wonderful till we started traveling back and forth to other countries where those countries, those areas, they become immune to these things, or they learn to cohabitate with it. But when it's released on an environment that has never had to fight it, there's a slaughter at first.
That goes right back to your segue into H.G. Wells and the release of the little organisms. Once it's out there, Mo, you're not getting it back. You can't put that baby back.
No.
Once it's there, it's there. So we're sensitive to what we're doing here in the environment, and with our research and our projects, we're not claiming that our pollen is better than natural pollen. It's not. It's just that we have an alternative when the natural stuff is not available. For example, as we speak, the melipona, as we know it today, which is man's oldest honeybee, the melipona, predates the Inca, the Moche in South America. As a species, is dying out in South America. And that is man's oldest bees. Those bees existed at the time of the pharaohs. The pharaohs didn't have European honeybees. They had melipona. They had stingless honeybees that took their honey and their nectar, and they produced their honey and nectar based on fructose and sucrose from fig trees and orange trees and limes, and that's why the honey produced in the Middle East, it's based on fruit. It's a fruit-based honey, as opposed to here in the United States where we have flowering blossoms.
Yeah, clover.
Clover, that sort of, clover plant.
Yeah.
So it's a different matrix. The honey matrix is completely different. So part of what my research was geared at doing was to create what we call designer honey. Was number one, I wanted to make honey that could be partaken or eaten by persons with diabetes, types 1 and types 2 diabetes. That's simply one of the reasons is, we lived among the Muslim community for over a year. They treated us very, very good. We carte blanche, comme il faut, everything we needed. And in those religions, there are religions on the face of the planet where their doctrine requires them to eat honey every day.
Yes.
Well, some people have diabetes, particularly, for example, in Malaysia.
In Malaysia,
85% of the population is diabetic, and they can't eat the honey. They eat the honey and they get sick. They get withdrawal and everything. So part of what we wanted to do with this project was to change the matrix of the honey molecule, which we did. And the way that we did that was we created an artificial pollen that comprised a nectar made with stevia. Pure, it was 99.9% pure stevia. And stevia is a natural sweetener. It's not a sugar. There's a difference between a sugar and a sweetener. The chemistry is completely different, where you have CH222O11 for sugar, and then for the carboxyl for the sweetener is a big long chain molecule. It's completely different, and it metabolizes differently. A sugar molecule, the metabolism is very rigorous on the human body, where a natural plant sweetener doesn't affect your blood sugar, doesn't affect your pulse rate, has no effect on your glycemic index, whereas sugar and honey, like agave honey. Agave honey, don't touch it. My recommendation, and along with Dr. Oz, so I'm quoting Dr. Oz, don't touch the agave honey. It has so much of the bad sucrose and fructose in it. It's literally, in fact, if I put one drop of the agave honey or the agave sweetener under your tongue and hold your arms down, you won't be able to move your arms for about 4 minutes. We did this in the laboratory, so I'm not making it up.
Which one of you was the guinea pig?
Good studies. I actually did this at the University of Pittsburgh years and years ago. And we succeeded in incorporating stevia into the matrix of the honey, by the way.
With the stingless.
With the stingless bee. So, in other words, what we did, we created these microcapsules that has the stevia side nectar inside of it. And stevia, again, is a natural plant sweetener. It's 300 times sweeter than sugar. Has no effect, no metabolic effect on the body whatsoever, no negative. And it's been used in China for over 4,000 years, so 3 billion Chinamen can't be wrong. There's something going on. They've got it going on. And that's one of the reasons we went to China, and on my Facebook wall you can see me standing in front of 50,000 acres of stevia that they told me, Dr. Joe, here, we want you to take all this stevia, encapsulate it, and bring your bees here and do all this stuff. So, that's another project that's in motion as we're talking. Just to mention in passing, in China, 9 million beekeepers registered.
Yeah.
9 million registered beekeepers. Unbelievable. I think in the state of North Carolina, I think we have 360.
Yeah. What is it? His name, Morgan Freeman. He bought a farm just for that purpose, to be a beekeeper.
Oh, a lot of guys are. Ted Nugent's into bees now.
Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah, that's Joy's buddy is Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers. He's into bees now. No, it's really good to get into it. In fact, here's a segue into another product we have. We have a product being built. It's in the prototype stage now, patent pending, where we have an apiary that we call it, CB?
CB.
Yeah, the CB feeder. That is and people have come up with this idea before, but ours has a little different twist on it. What it is a visible beehive that you place in your kitchen window, along with a specially grown, we have a queen that we have cultured down in one of our partners in Georgia that we call them little queens, because they'll only handle so many, and the hive will only take so many bees. And once it reaches a threshold and tolerance of a census of actual numbers of bees, Winnie the Pooh count all the bees in the hive, once it reaches this apex of so many bees in the hive, the soldiers won't let any more bees come into the hive. And each bee is a known member of the community. It's the darndest thing you've ever seen. And we're going to have a little bit of
bees and ants amaze me. They just amaze me.
That one, Three Stooges, where the Stooges are, watching the professor's house, and the gongs go off, and this one Russian goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's funny. I was thinking that when my clocks go off. But we successfully microencapsulated the stevia compound, and we use that. We give away free samples of that, and we're not able to go into sales yet because we're waiting for the Department of Agriculture to certify our, what is it, Joy, the formula?
It's just a simple analysis.
Yeah,
There's no testing. All of that's completed. It's just a simple analysis.
Yeah, the analysis. You look on like your Pepsi can, and it'll say crude protein 0%, fat 0,
right.
Moisture content.
It's just a simple verification of the analysis.
Yeah, I mean, all it is water, distilled water, in one case stevia compound, stevia side, and beeswax. So... And
let me ask you something. Would this be considered genetically modified bee food?
Absolutely not. No, in fact, our suppliers, we buy all non-GMO and all non-irradiated beeswax. It's non-irradiated. This is natural beeswax, non-GMO, organic. On our label, we say non-GMO, organic, and made in America. That's So yeah, we're very attentive.
That's where the market is right now. The non-GMOs, organic. That's
the vegans love us. The vegans.
Yeah.
Love us. Oh yeah.
So the name of the company is the Carolina Bee Food Company.
That's right. That's one of our companies. Actually, if your listeners are interested, they can go to www.armanco.com, and from armanco.com there are different links on the top of the page where Joy has it pulled up. They can go to the links for Carolina Bee Food Company, They can see the different brands. Our board of directors met in January and decided they were going to brand me. So the brand is Dr. Joe's Original. So we've got 13 different products that I've invented that are either patented or patent pending under the Dr. Joe's umbrella. It's beef food, Poochie Peds. Just if your folks are interested, they can just go and scroll to the different links and click on the links and learn all about Carolina Bee Food Company, where we are, what we're doing, where we're located, our hours, and we're real easy to find, too. I mean, the bill collectors don't have any trouble finding us, so...
Yeah. Stalkers find me. I don't know. And I'm just an old lady. Did I lose you?
No, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I just drink a coffee.
No. It's just when you speak and I speak, there's a little bit of dead air. And that's because we're on phone. They are up on their little mountain doing their experiments. And I send them down victims now and again, just, to keep things interesting. You are a busy, busy man. What I think people don't understand is, and I see it down the camper because we're in the middle of Wharton State Forest in New Jersey, and people have flower gardens, and my site has clover and whatever was there, and then I'll get a note from the office asking me to please cut the clover because my neighbors want their campsites to look like, I don't know, I guess resort campsites or something, and they don't like the bees being around. I even got a note one time saying one of your neighbors has a child allergic to bees, and I'm like, what the hell are they doing in the state forest then? Yeah. And they're out there and they're spraying. You sit there at night and you're enjoying a campfire and you get a mouthful of some kind of pesticide, and all you have to do is light a little vanilla candle and that'll make them all go away, because your breath is what attracts mosquitoes. Your carbon dioxide that you're pushing out is what the mosquitoes are after. And I'm like, I'll yell out to the top of my lungs, we're in a state forest, for Christ's sake. Stop spraying everything. But at the same breath, they have a hummingbird feeder out. And they're spraying this crap all over the place. And the bees are coming to these plants, and they're eating, trying to get to these plants, and they're covered with some kind of pesticide. When did people become so stupid?
Well, bees don't actively seek people to sting.
No.
It's a defense.
No.
Except the Africanized bees. Yeah. Mo, I don't have the answer for you.
Dr. Joe is allergic to bees.
I'm allergic to bees, and I had one bee sting last summer with our hive. In fact, when Joy and I go into the hives and do our studies, and I just ordered a new borescope that should be here any day now. I can't wait till it comes so I can take pictures of the inside of my beehives and actually show people the bees carrying our bee food the whole way up from the bottom of the hive up into the chamber and into the queen and doing that. But I don't. I never use pesticides. And again, Joy and I very rarely suit up. The only time we really suit up is when we'll bring in a new colony from the nukes, and we'll suit up because the bees get to know you.
Right, they get to know you. It's like they expect me to come out and bring them their water. That way I know their water source came from me. Yeah. And so I know they'll seek other water sources, but if it's right there available, that's one of the first rules of beekeeping is keeping your bees
hydrated.
Of water right there, so you know that
it's good water. You want to give them
exactly.
Good water.
And in the time of day, you either at dusk or at dawn is the best time to work with them. They're more docile,
and they ball up.
And we don't use smokers. We spritz with water.
We spritz with water.
Something you're saying right now clicked with me. Down the way from the campground is the blueberry capital of the world, and a terrible, terrible storm went through there during the summer last year. And I got up, and there were hundreds and hundreds of honeybees at my hummingbird feeders. And I right away said, I'll bet you that the beehives got damaged, and their food, because the farmers bring, like you do, they bring out the water and they bring out food for them because they want those bees to pollinate the blueberry bushes.
Yeah.
And it clicked right away. And I said, we have to keep this stuff clean because not only are the hummingbirds coming for this, but the bees are desperate for it, And for at least 3 weeks, it was that way until the blueberry farms got back on their feet again and were able to fix all the hives up and everything. And I took a ride down there, and, there were trees down. Everything was a mess. But, yeah, cleanliness, clean water, supplying a habitat for these creatures. They're so tiny, but they're one of the first links in our food chain. We need vegetables. We need fruit. And we need them. And people are killing them because, well, my Johnny's allergic. I'm allergic to peanuts and nuts. I don't eat them. End of problem.
I do.
Well, I think on many levels, we're all beekeepers.
Yeah.
Now, the difference between, if you have an apiary and, you're a beekeeper, but some people are bee havers. And there's a difference. There's a beekeeper and a bee haver. Beekeeper has, the passion and chooses to always educate themselves. There's nobody who knows everything about bees. It's all a learning process.
And
every time because they become your children and they're different. Like your children are different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it's always I tell people, make sure that you concentrate on being a beekeeper, not a bee haver. And then that said, all of us, you don't have to be have a beehive to be a beekeeper because it's up to us, all of us, to be beekeepers.
Yeah, you can put out a little dish of nectar, although I don't recommend using sugar.
No.
Sugar water, put out a little bowl of sugar water.
Well, anyway, just being conscious of the pesticide use and that sort of thing. That's how I mean, the level of we're all beekeepers and taking care of Earth as
Joy's a lot more esoteric than I am about beekeepers, about beekeeping and that stuff. She gets more into it, the spiritual end. I get more into it, the anatomical end of it, and the biological end of it, the process end of it, and the physiological breakdown of acetylcholine and all that stuff. Where Joy's more into the aesthetic, the love and beauty of nature, sort of.
Yeah, she kind of pleads out her case in a more, you want to be a good person, you don't want to be a bad person. It's like, hoarders. You don't want to be a hoarder. You want to be a responsible person. And like I said, when I saw these bees on our hummingbird feeders, I went, because it was a wicked storm. I mean, I actually was ready to put Teddy under the table in the camper because I thought we were going to get lifted up.
They won't bother you. They won't.
Yeah, well, from the storm. And, the bees, they were just like, well, nice lady, we don't know who you are, but we're eating your hummingbird nectar.
Yeah.
Yeah, they said, ma'am, you are our beekeeper today.
Well, that's the reasons we developed the Bee Feed ER stations and why we're, trying to advance that technology. But I'll tell you, in one sense, working with the government, it's like a jellyfish, okay? There's this huge animal with 1 million tentacles out there floating in the water, and you keep poking and poking and poking it. Sooner or later, they turn around and notice you, okay?
Yeah.
That's about where we are now. And I think,
you know how it works. Hurry up and wait.
Yeah. Well, we've just about cracked that nut. We're just waiting for, some holy water to be sprinkled by the USDA. As soon as we get that under our belt, I mean, we have
it's all in motion.
Yeah, it's all in motion. We have our licenses from the Department of Agriculture here, and of course, we're listed on North Carolina Department of Agriculture's beekeeping site.
Yeah, their online farmers market site.
Online farmers market and all that stuff. And we're very, very proud to be the first bee food manufacturing company here in North Carolina. And I don't know of any other ones here in the United States. Believe it or not, like the bee food patties and the chemical type bee foods and pest control agents and stuff, they're owned by people in Italy. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Let me ask you a very practical question as long as we're still on this topic.
Yeah.
Because people are going to listen to this and say, you know what, let me start a bee farm or at least get a beehive or something. Like I said, down there is a person that I know who is a beekeeper in the spirit that Joy is talking about. They are professional. They are trained. They supply them to the local farmers and everything, and they're the ones that got hammered to death. But this isn't something you pick up willy-nilly because, like anything else, these bees are going to be back in the spring and need care again. So you've taken care of them, and they did come to know me. I did not get stung once for that entire 2 or 3 week episode. I never got stung. They moved away from it when I put the food out. They never bothered me. And then one morning, ta-da, they were gone. I drove down the road. She says, they're back. And she had the beehives up and running, and she had everything set up for them, and the farmers had their crap together. This is not something you pick up willy-nilly, right?
No.
Yeah, and our bee food, the Carolina Bee Food Company, our goal is to of course, not replace their pollination source because we need them, out there actively pollinating our crops. But it's a supplement, to help rescue them.
In times of bad weather, like monsoon or winter.
Yeah, when there's low to no pollination sources, do you know at early spring they starve?
Yeah.
Right.
Don't cut your dandelions, or they need those dandelions because they starve.
A conventional hive, just let me jump in here. A conventional hive needs about 90 pounds of sugar to survive winter. 90 pounds of
wow.
Yeah, straight up honey.
Straight up honey to survive winter. And that's a colony of maybe 35,000, about 3.5, 4 pounds of bees. That's a lot of honey. And if you don't have that source available, from natural fodder, and you're not feeding them, your colony will die. And then there's some natural thinning that goes on. Some of the worker bees are pushed out of the hive, and the hive is an amazing entity. It has a way of equilibrating and keeping itself where it's manageable, that the maximum number of individuals will survive, and based on only what's needed. So
everything's logic.
I mean, you wouldn't think that bees were capable of something like that, but it's really miraculous if you study them deeply enough and read up on them. They really are. And just to mention in passing, my favorite variety of bees that I like to work with are called corneolans, and they are a hybrid. They are a hybridized honeybee that were bred with Russian bees and bees from England. So they call them corneolans, and then they were crossbred with Italian bees. And they have a very, very, they're like, Posta Bazoo, they're very, very friendly. Yeah, buongiorno. They're they're like Italian bees,
Yeah, hey, Captain! Hey, how's it going? You feeding us today?
Buongiorno. Yeah, but really, they're so gentle with us. And again, the only reason I got stung is I was working in the hive, and I didn't have my glasses on, and I squeezed a bee accidentally and stung me. My fault, mea culpa. That was not the bee's fault. But that's the only time that's the first time I want to say in years, that I can remember that I was stung. And working with the stingless bees over in Malaysia and Borneo and stuff, they'll land on you, but their jaws are so small. Their jaws are 5 microns. They can only spread about 5 microns. That's extremely small. That's 1/50th the size of your hair. That's very small.
Yeah,
so they can't.
Pore is 50 microns.
Yeah, pore is 50 microns. So they can't bite you.
No.
They'll get on you, and you can feel them sort of tickling you, and they are trying to bite you, but they can't because their mouths are too small. It's like the daddy long-legged spider,
Yeah.
deadly poison, but its mouth is so small it can't bite you. So it's it's ineffective.
Let me break in here. Have you seen Mr. Holmes with Sirian McKellen? The young boy that lives in the house, his mother is Holmes' housekeeper, says, do they bite? Because Holmes retires as a beekeeper in the country, and he says, my dear boy, bees don't bite, they sting. And then later on, the mother is saying, do they bite? And he doesn't want to embarrass the mother, so he says, no, ma'am, they do not bite. But he doesn't say they sting because he doesn't want to embarrass her in front of her son and make her appear stupid. But the kid looks at him and smiles. Yeah, bees don't bite, they sting, but they only do that under extreme circumstances. If you're going to squash one, or you're antagonizing them, you might get nailed. But I can't even remember ever being stung by a bee.
The melipona, they swarm to protect themselves.
Yeah, and here, another thing, here's what melipona do. And so do wasps. And now this will be interesting for you. The predator, the chief predator of the melipona, is first of all, is the Malaysian beekeeper, the Borneo, the birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The eater.
The Malaysian bee eater. You should see, your people, if you want to see a beautiful bird, go online. It is absolutely gorgeous. The Malaysian bee eater. It's the most vivid shade of blue I've ever. We had one in our backyard because it tried to get into our kelalut, which is our bee where we kept our bees. It means in Malaysian, hill of bees. And actually, it was a tree trunk, and that's where the melipona live in tree trunks and in discarded places, and just about any place where they can find habitat that's safe. But their chief predator, aside from the the Malaysian bee eater or the Borneo bee eater, and on each of these continents that we go to, there's a bird that's a bee eater, and it's the neatest thing. But also, a predator are spiders. Okay.
Right.
Now, these little guys, identical to a wasp, can produce with their wings a frequency that absolutely, it paralyzes the spider. Once it paralyzes the spider, the soldiers go and kill the spider. It's the darndest thing you've ever seen. Yeah. They flap their wings at a certain frequency. Now, I didn't, of course, in the jungle, I didn't have my audiometers and all that stuff to do that.
Yeah.
But someday I want to do that study, and I haven't been able to find it in the literature anywhere. So that means that some young kid listening to me, if he wants to get a master's or a Ph.D., should study the vibrational frequency of these animals.
Yeah.
Study, what frequency is that, when it flaps its wings, what is that? How many hertz is that? What frequency? How many decibels is that? And they'll get their master's or Ph.D. I'd want to do it, I just don't have time to do it. But we observed that, in real time in situ in our experiments where the hive would be attacked by several of these Malaysian bee-eating spiders, and the bees would swarm, never land on them, to the point where the spiders were paralyzed. And then the little bit larger bees than the miniata, what was the other species?
Itama?
Yeah, Itama and Miniama would gang up on these things and kill the spiders and protect the hive. And at each hive entrance with melipona, there are soldier bees. If your folks go to my Facebook wall, they can look at some of the pictures I have posted up there. And I think on our Manco site and Carolina Bee Food Company, we have links that show the videos of these little creatures, how they actually guard the entrance to the hive, and they're called soldiers. And if they look white, it's because they all have white hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the older ones, the old men, are the soldiers. They have white hair on their heads.
Also, the pollen that we were feeding them, Ours was a white.
A white powder, yeah.
Yeah.
And see, when we make this, when I create the bee food, I can control the valence. In other words, I can control I can control the electrical charge of the bee food. For example, if you want a bee food that sticks to the bee, that clings to the bee, I put a positive charge on it. If you want one that doesn't stick to the bee, I put a negative charge on that. And that's a function that I accomplished during the manufacturing process. Mm-hmm. And it's a simple function of either grounding the instrument or not grounding the instrument. So right. I can alter the valence of the bee food. If I want it to stick to the bee, which is actually better for the bee, because it doesn't have to carry that much, and they can only get so much in their pollen sacs. So once they load those pollen sacs up, and you probably have seen on the internet beautiful pictures that some photographers have taken, where you see all these, thousands and thousands of these little droplets that look like glistening drops of water. Well, that's actually honey nectar clinging to the bee, and it has a positive charge on it. Now, if that didn't have a positive charge, it wouldn't stick to the bee. So that's one of the other features of our product. We make it so that when you dispense it into the hive, as soon as the bee comes in contact with it, it clings to the bee. It doesn't hurt the bee, because it doesn't interfere with movement of the joints or the wings or anything like that, because the wings on a bee can be positively charged or negatively charged, and the valence, whether you know this or not, the valence of the wing of a bee is constantly changing as a function of movement through air, time, and space. So it's constantly, when it goes up, it has one charge. When it comes down, it discharges the energy, and it has a different valence. So to most people, that doesn't mean anything, but to a knucklehead like me, it's important, because I need to know what the valence is. It's a positive charge or negative charge on that wing, because I don't want my stuff to stick to that bee's wing. If I do that, with our knowledge of aerodynamics, where's this going? Our knowledge of aerodynamics, the bee won't be able to fly. And we want the bees to be able to fly. But we want them to be able to transport the maximum amount of our product into the inner workings of the hive. So when we put our product on the floorboard of the hive, and the bee comes in, lands on the floorboard of the hive, a certain number, let's say, just for giggles, let's say 20,000 micrograms of this pollen material goes on to that bee. That bee goes into the hive and actually carries that stuff right into the hive. And bees are very, very social. They're over and over and over. And, they eat off of each other. They clean each other. They take care. They feed each other. So there's a goodly amount of this pollen, artificial pollen in bee food, always being uptaken into the inner workings of the hive. Now, that's significant in terms of the other product that we develop to treat for trachea and varroa mites. We have another product that uses essential oils, where we've encapsulated an essential oil that is absolutely lethal to the trachea, varroa mite, and moths. So this product, which we're having that certified as well, is designed to kill. It's designed to be a natural pesticide. I call it that because the law says I have to call it a pesticide. I don't like the term pesticide because that denotes use of a chemical.
Yeah, it's not
right.
Low toxicity.
We call it LTIP. It's low toxicity integrated pest management product. We call it LTIP. If your listeners are interested, they can go to Armancos.com's website. Click to the far right. You'll see green products, and LTIP is one of them. The low toxicity integrated pest management. We use essential oils such as tea tree oil, cedar wood, lavender. See, the way that our product works is, and the way that all of these chemicals work, is through suffocation. You suffocate the mite. That's how you.
Right.
You got to suffocate them.
And it's in proportion to the size of the mite, so it doesn't harm the bee.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt the bee. The bee can eat this because it comes from natural plants. But the difference between our product and the other guys out there who make these bee cakes and they're using pesticides like DEET and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they're putting it into the hives, and guess what? The whole hive dies.
Right.
Or you have those toxins, and along with certain pathogens that develop as a result of using neurotoxins, like the nicotinoids, going into your honey. You don't want to eat that crap.
No.
So we don't use that, but we're as about as holistic as you can get. I mean, the whole thing with me and bees goes back over 30 years, Mo, when I developed the way to clean up oil spills using nothing but beeswax and natural.
Okay.
So, my history in working with the bees goes back at least 40 years. I had my first hive from my grandpa when I was about 9 years old. And
wow.
I've been doing bees ever since.
We have to go to a break.
Okay.
Because I'm getting messaged by a bunch of people, and I want to talk to you first.
Okay.
Our guest is Joe Resnick and Joy Mann, and they are very busy people. They are scientists, inventors. Joe's got patents and more patents and more patents. A brilliant man. But we're going to play another song by Fred Astaire, take a break, because I want to talk something over with Joe before I do anything. And you're listening to Mo Banshee's Lair on Dreamstream Radio, and I hope you're enjoying it. And we're going to play a little Fred Astaire, The Way You Look Tonight, because it's his birthday today.
Dreamstream Radio.
Welcome back to Mo Banshee's Lair with Dr. Joseph Resnick and Joy Mann. You are a busy guy, and we were just singing the praises of Joy because we were just talking about work ethics, working hard, and we had to.
We did.
We were the baby. I guess I was one of the first baby boomers after World War II. But, our parents didn't come out of World War II millionaires, and we learned our work ethics from them, and there was no such thing as, well, that didn't work, walk away. Well, if that didn't work, find a way to make it work,
That's right. I agree.
And that's something that's really lacking, because now I see even in the academic world, in science, in everything, it's, well, that didn't work. Who's got an idea? Instead of the individual trying to come up with something, they look to someone else. It's, no, follow it through. Find an answer, and don't stop till you've got an answer. And then, yeah, and I always say a good investigation always creates more questions.
You know what get me, Mo? People would tell me, you can't do that, or you can't develop that. And you have all these people in the background saying, you can't. And guess what?
Right.
2 or 3 weeks later, I'd have this little gadget in my hand and say, hey, buddy, remember that? You said you can't? Try this. How do you like these apples? How do you like these beans, Jack? And guess who the Jack was? Some general.
Yeah.
How the hell did you do that? I've got $50 million, and my guys can't come up with that. You've got the wrong guy. That's all. You just did, you're here. But getting back to the work ethic, my father was born in Czechoslovakia, and the work ethic there was no work, no eat.
Yep.
You worked or you didn't eat. So I learned at an early age the value of hard work, and for many years, all I did was work and go to school. From the time of from my teen years until I was about 43, where I got my first big multi-million-dollar check, all I did was work and go to school and, do the family, raise a family, kids, vote, church, do that. And then, around 43, I started to kick back a little bit, and I sat back and said, you know what? I'm only working on what I want to work on from now on, and I don't care who likes it. Because, of course, at that time, I had enough money to pick and choose. So, I got tired of people telling me what to do. You will work on this, you will do this. I work on what I want to work on, and I'm still that way now. I guess I'm sort of a partly recluse and part mad scientist. I don't like to use that term, but I work on what I want to work on now. So,
right.
And only projects that are of interest to me and things that I think can make a valuable impact and lasting impact for generations. that's what I've dedicated the rest of my life. You know, I'm 63 years old now. I don't have another 63 years. I might not have another 63 minutes. I don't know. But
we don't know how long we're here for.
No, so when I walk off this planet, you know, I'm going off with you know, hopefully, you know, a lot more than I came in with, and I'm going to leave a nice clear path for young people to follow, pick up and build on my work, and, you know, maybe they'll find a cure for cancer, or maybe they'll find a cure for this, or maybe they'll, you know, who knows. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I give my work freely. I put a lot of my stuff, I've even stopped patenting and just put out there for general, you know, public information. Here, you can do something with this, do it. You know, your turn. I've already had 10 Humvees.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Remco.
Or Manco.
Manco, sorry.
Yeah, Armanco. R-M-A-N-N-C-O. Yeah, Armanco is it's a holding company. It's a private, family-owned company. We don't have any public investors or anything like that. It's all family members, and it serves as and functions as a holding company and a marketing platform for the various inventions that I have, some 26 of them, now 28 now. 28 now, 12 of them classified. A lot of the things that are classified are things that you see on TV every day, like stealth bombers and certain gear worn by the military and oil spill cleanup stuff and stuff that you know, classified. It's classified stuff.
Right.
But the other things that are out there are the gadgety sort of things that I've developed that you know, have been used, and I've sold the licenses off to them, like the Miracle Ear. I sold that very early on. That was one of my first batches of cash that enabled me to walk out of medical school and to, you know, determine, okay, I don't want to be a medical doctor. I want to be a scientist, an applied scientist. And then I parlayed that along with my real estate investments that I made when I was a young man in my 20s into the fortune that I realized at the age of 43, and just kept on going and going and going, and, you know, to this point at this stage in my life today, where and I'll admit I'm spoiled. I get up in the morning and I go fishing and have my coffee and, you know, jump in my Jeep and I'm down on the riverbank fishing in 2 minutes and catching big trout, you know. I jokingly tell my friends I've already died and went to heaven, I just didn't fall over yet. Right. But the lifestyle is so good here in the North Carolina mountains, and the temperature and the weather's beautiful and the people are wonderful. We're very actively involved in the Citizens Emergency Management Response Team efforts that go on here. We work very closely with FEMA and the emergency management personnel here. In fact, Joy and I are directors for our region here in the Patterson Fire District in the PD River Valley. In the event of any kind of natural disaster, we are incident commanders for this region. And it's a 3 to 7 square mile area that we have jurisdiction over in the event of some kind. Of course, we're just coordinators. You know, we have no real authority other than to, you know, be first on the scene, to designate, to help and assist emergency management personnel who are the professionals, such as DHS and Caldwell County DMS and all those people. We're just citizens doing our part. But, you know, we're part of the community. We're actively involved. We belong to the Caldwell County Beekeepers Association, the Watauga County Beekeepers Association, North Carolina Beekeepers Association. So we keep involved. We're involved in a lot of different things. And in my spare time, which I do have some spare time, I continue to operate the www.vansforvets.org entity that I established to help.
All right. I'm going to try to add this call to the group, and everybody pray for me.
Okay. No holds barred.
Okay. Okay. Caller, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. Who are you?
John Fountain, like a water fountain.
Hi, John. How you doing?
All right. How you doing, Mo?
Okay. Can you hear him, Joe?
Yes, I can. Hi, John. Good to hear your voice, buddy.
Hey, John.
How you doing, buddy? I haven't talked to you in a while.
It's been a while. Well, everything's good on this end. I wanted to comment on the improvements you've made to the Galactic Resources Management website, and I wanted to know, can you give me a quick update as to what's going on with John Lear and Ron Schmidt on that end. But hold on, I just sent Ron some samples of something that's pretty exotic. I don't know if he's mentioned it to you or not, but can you tell me a little bit more about what you guys are doing over in that part of the universe, so to speak?
Well, to be honest with you, Joe, I haven't spoken with Ron in a little bit. He's been a little on the ill side and taking care of some personal things. So we haven't talked recently very much. Every now and then he'll pop in on my Facebook Messenger account and talk to me about one thing or another, but not really lately. On the
John Lear.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I had a nice note last week from John Lear. I'm glad to see he's feeling a little better.
Yeah, in fact, I'm jumping between this show and another show that John's on right now. Yeah, he's doing one right now out in California. So it's kind of I get best of both worlds. I get you and Joy, and I jump on over and I listen a little bit to John. But he's feeling a lot better now, which is good because he's getting on in age. Us young guys. You 63, me 66.
Oh, Jesus. You make us sound like we're antiquated. Oh, my God. You guys are babies.
Babies? Oh, Lord. I just
my husband's going to be 85 for crying out loud. Come on. You guys are babies. Quit bitching. Mother Earth is not kind to age. I don't know. We all, what did they say? The golden years? Yeah, right.
Well, I just recently retired in January, and I've dedicated my free time to wine tasting. So,
how are you and Joe? You guys are partners in this company, right?
That's right.
Yes. Universal Mineral Leases Registry, and Ron Schmidt and John Lear and I are partners in the Galactic Resource Management. We kind of do the day-to-day management of the mineral leases, off-world mineral leases.
And recovery.
Yeah, oh yes, and space debris and recovery. That was one thing I was just reading in the news, that the Air Force's secret space plane just came back from a year in orbit, the X-37B space plane, and I wanted to ask you about that, if you had any idea what those guys were doing up there for over a year.
Somebody said satellite recovery, but I don't know who the somebody was. They wouldn't tell me his name. They're doing satellite recoveries.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I kind of thought that, but then, they said it was up there for a whole year, so I figured they were doing some other stuff too. I didn't know if it was had anything to do with space debris, as your modules are designed to do.
Part of that has to deal with the space debris recovery. I know that I was at a briefing several months ago in Washington where we had a discussion about there are two particular satellites that crashed. One was that are out there. Well, they may still be there. The last known trajectory. The NASA database has every one of them identified. Every piece has been named and has nomenclature. We know its trajectory. So, it's not outside the realm of possibility that the space plane was out there doing recovery. Although LEO and, shallow Earth orbit and the deep Earth orbit, they look like they're pretty confined if you look at it on a macro scale or at NASA's website. There's a lot of room out there, Brother Einstein used to say, and this is what I loved about Einstein. Einstein said, space is big enough for everybody. That's why I try to welcome everybody to get their interest involved in space entrepreneurism and universal mineral leases and that whole concept of commercializing space. And, it's not like, okay, Joe Resnick owns the moon. Well, everybody owns the moon. I would never be so brazen enough to say, well, I own the moon. No, what I own is a business model to do, to create commerce based on extraterrestrial real estate. That's all.
Well,
I never.
One of the things that got me interested in this whole thing about mineral leases and the commercialization of space is that we are giving the general public the opportunity to be a part of it, not some gigantic corporation that does stuff with the government in secret, and the next thing you know, they're reaping the rewards. This way, the everyday citizen, everyday human can have access to that.
That's why
that's what interested me when I first got involved with this.
That was the hook that got you on board. Here's what I think. I think you became really interested and saw the genuineness of what we were doing when Team Rock, that's Resnick, O'Neill, and Kramer, that's Colonel Tim O'Neill and my partner Guy Kramer, we got together and we established Team Rock, and we set aside those portions of the moon and Mars as reserves. And we worked with a team of 17 international scientists to develop a map, and we've mapped that and we've charted it, and we claim that those sites, those lunar landing sites and sites on Mars, those should be protected. And someday they will. Eventually, they will. Those are historical sites, and they should be protected. And that's part of what in the greater scope of the UMLR.net phenomenon is to protect that sort of thing and to give people claim to that kind of ownership. I mean, everyday people. And I'll tell you this much: no one has come forward in over almost 40 years now to dispute my claims. You know why? First of all, there's no court of competent jurisdiction on this planet to which a case could be brought. There is no court of competent jurisdiction, and the space treaty as we know it today was never signed and never ratified by all 168 countries. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that piece of paper is not worth the ink that's on it.
Before you go any further, I think you need to explain to our listeners what you're talking about when you talk about real estate and the moon and Mars and recovering resources. Give a real fast Reader's Digest so people understand what you're talking about.
The version is that many years ago while in med school, I had this idea to start selling stars and naming stars. I got involved with those guys. I sold my interest out, and with a view toward that when I hit a certain age, and that age was 55, I was going to launch a different project where I would start selling mineral leases to the different minerals on the extraterrestrial real estate. And I did that. And what I did was to create a business model, filed a patent, had two patent applications pending on that, withdrew the one, improved the business model, filed another one, let that one go abandoned in 3 years. Then I filed another one, and I have another one pending now that incorporates all of the old stuff into this new business model. It's a business model. I don't claim to own the moon, but what I do claim to own is the business model to sell the construct that consists of minerals on these extraterrestrial planets. Now, I've been marginally successfus. I've given more away than I've sold, to be honest with you, but I can tell you that there's a valley on Mars called Mars Trincanum that is owned by my late great friend that you probably knew him, Kevin Smith, who passed away a few years ago. Kevin's heirs own that, and we gave them a deed to that piece of property, and that piece of property is 3 times the size of the Grand Canyon and solid gold. 3 times the size of the Grand Canyon. I'm not the guy who says it's that big. NASA says it's that big, and their radiograms tell us what it's made of. So there is gold on Mars. There's enough gold in Mars to probably build a small moon. And, someday someone's going to go there, if for no other reason, to harvest that gold. Who knows? Maybe that's where the ETs get their gold to.
Let me jump in here. It reminds me of, it happened once upon a time in the West, where the girl goes out, she marries this guy, and the family's killed by the outlaws, and she can't figure it out. And then the one guy realizes that it's the only water in the whole area, and the train's going to go past at the railroad, and so he's banking on them having to go through his property to get to that water. And basically this is the same scenario. Eventually we are going to have the technology to get those resources, and somebody's going to own them, right?
Absolutely. Well, there is a completely different school of thought, if I can diverse for a second.
Okay.
There is the school of thought where there's already lunar mining taking place, and it has been taking place at least since 1954. And I'm not the guy who says that. My colleague, John Lear, has evidence to that. And I have personally interviewed Russian scientists who are in charge of, what's that called, Roscoff? The Russian spaceport? And the guys who did that design?
Roscosmos.
Yeah, Roscosmos. Personally, and have it videotaped, the interview with this individual, which I have on my YouTube channel, but it's private, where he states that he was the commander of this crew, that it was a Russian crew, and they are mining materials on the dark side of the moon. And there's a base on the dark side of the moon. I know as fantastic as it sounds, I found it hard to believe, but there's a book written about it. It's called Red Sails. It's written by a Russian. I can't remember the guy's. I've broken off all ties with the Russians in the last couple of years, for one reason or another. But it's called Red Sails is the name of the book. I can't remember the author's name. But in that book, it tells the whole story of the Russian space program and how long it's been going, and names and people and I think it's the real deal, just based on my knowledge of the individuals that I worked with on a couple of these projects who happen to be Russian scientists. Very smart guys. And they had no reason to lie to me or make this stuff up. There was nothing for them to gain, nothing for them to lose. It was very casual conversation, matter of fact, and nobody drinking or anything like that. There's Skypes going back and forth into different parts of the world. But as you say, Mo, someday we're going to have the technology to do this stuff and recover those minerals, and because the minerals we have here on Earth are finite, and we're going to have to find something. And if Malthus was right, Thomas Malthus was right about his Malthusian theorem of overplanetary population and stuff. Population is going to reach a point here on the Earth where we have to find an alternate source to supply the people on the Earth. So whether that's agricultural products or industrial products, minerals, gems, whatever, we're going to need that stuff. Now, it might not be for another 200 or 300 years. Of course, all of us will have walked off the planet by that time. But that certainly, as sure as I'm sitting in this chair, that day is coming. So, like much of the work that I have done over the last 40 years, I'm generally about 30 years ahead of my time. Case in point, see these little body cameras you see all the police wearing now? Invented it 20 years ago and filed a patent or patented it. Part of my, reactive body armor patent I developed for the military. So now you see them out there. At the time, I was advancing that technology. I couldn't get anybody interested. I couldn't get any of the airlines.
Take a drink of something. Wine, beer.
We call it techno lag.
Right.
Correct.
One of the things that Galactic Resource Management does for the Universal Mineral Leases Registry is we have created maps of for mineral leases and on the moon, Mars, all the exoplanets, Vesta, Ceres, and we have a website that the umlr.net website that you can log in and pick out your lot if you're 4,000 acres. And we're not selling land. We are selling the opportunity to gain mineral leases.
Another way to explain this, I like analogies. Sometimes they're the quicker way to explain it. The Music Man, when the old ladies are bitching to him and say, well, we own the library, but she owns the books.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the idea behind it,
Exactly. And keep in mind, again, my hallmark is what Einstein said: space is big enough for everybody.
Yeah.
One doesn't own it. We welcome people to come into UMLR. And, what a fantastic opportunity. We have the privilege to work with one of the original Power Rangers who actually did the videos for our presentations and our sites. And that in itself is worth a real close look. Paulie Shire is his name. He's just a brilliant, brilliant guy. One of the original Power Rangers, was kind enough to do some developmental work and design work for us, particularly on the space debris recovery modules. He was very assistive to me. And that resulted in publication of a paper for the International Space Development Convention in San Diego. When was that, Joy? In 2014. Yeah, just before we went to Malaysia, I made a presentation at the, ISDC in San Diego, and we got on a plane and went to Malaysia. But those videos and those renderings were done by Paulie Shire, and for which we remain grateful. But that's one of the things that I wanted to discuss tonight. And, John has been very assistive. John's got a real interesting background in terms of cartography. John, I don't know how much you can disclose or, talk about your skill as a map maker, but ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you this man is probably, if not the foremost, one of the foremost cartographers on the face of this planet.
Oh, Joe, that's kind words. I don't know if I'm going to be able to live up to that, but
you're pretty good.
It's been my joy to be able to work on this, to be able to search out the correct maps that different space agencies have produced, which made it quite easier for us. We basically use USGS maps and the JPL maps that they've published, and then I bring those into a CAD system, and I lay it all out and by 25 square mile blocks, and then divide that up into 4,000 acres of lots, which is quite a bit, quite a job. If anybody's ever tried to look at a map of, say, a neighborhood, a suburb, try mapping an entire planet.
Right.
It takes taken quite a bit of effort to do that, but I bring these maps into CAD, I scale them up for full size, and then I just start working it in CAD, and then I can produce those into PDF files and make pretty nice maps on that, if I do say so myself.
Well, the challenge for you is you're not sitting on the ground with one of these with these machines, little tools, walking them out, and measuring. I mean, you're not on there, and that in itself is amazing to me. You could say all you want for GPS, but when it comes to selling an idea, you need a visual.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what we've done. I've done quite a bit of research, many hours of searching and researching and finding the correct maps that would make it easier to identify different minerals, especially on the moon, as far as H3 for fusion reactors. That would be a very, very lucrative venture. Harrison Schmidt had published a paper for the University of Wisconsin talking about mining H3 and on the lunar surface. And I believe, as Joe mentioned earlier about the Russians, I believe that's what they're doing up there right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the Chinese have already stated, that they're after H3. They're making no bones about it. Yeah, they're making they make no bones about it. They're after helium-3. So that becomes the question: why aren't we going after it?
Yeah, well, I suppose one of the big problems, and this is introducing or opening up a segue, as you called it, to space debris. We can't clean up our own damn planet. Everywhere you walk, it's trash, and then you say to somebody, let's allocate, billions of dollars to go and retrieve minerals and resources from the moon. And that's when the American people kind of shut down and say, wait a minute. The Chinese and the Ruskies, they're not afraid to let people go without for the big ball, for the big ring on the Ferris wheel. You know what I'm talking about? The old Ferris, the carousel, where you had the brass ring, the wood ring.
Restrictions that we live under here in the United States.
Right.
We have these environmental laws that we adhere to, and because of those environmental laws, we lose billions of dollars in revenue. Where these other countries that don't have the EPA breathing down their neck on everything that they do, they're out there, making plastic and mining gold and using water and just doing all kinds of things, tearing the crap out of the earth. And we over here in the United States, we're hamstrung. We can't do, so we have to be.
And we're buying it from them. We're buying this crap off of them. Yeah, look at every piece of plastic you got almost, and it comes from China, some other country, and we're buying it, and then we're throwing it. People, I hate to say this, I'm not a hoarder, but I beat myself up if I have a plastic container, like food container, and it's not eligible to be recycled, and it's going to end up in the land, and I'm hanging on to it because in my mind I'm trying to save the land and save my hopefully great grandchildren from cancer, because our water is just a pea soup of crap. Plastic, broken down PVC, you name it, it's in there. And we keep buying it from these third world countries that, like you say, they are not under the same laws. And I'm not saying that environmental laws should be banned, but step it up and say, we're not allowing that in our country from you either. Yeah. That's the only way it stops.
I can tell you, I've been all over the South China Sea, from one end of it to the other, and I've never seen so much plastic in one place. To every beach that I ever visited, I saw more medical waste and plastic bottles and drink bottles, and you can't walk barefoot on the beaches in Southeast Asia.
Unless it's a private resort?
Yeah, even the private resorts I wouldn't walk.
I'm going to throw this out to our listeners. There is a really good independent film called Trashed, and Jeremy Irons is in it, and he has a site, and you can go to that site. It's called Trashed. And I think you can rent it for like $2 off of Amazon. Yeah. I think one of the worst things we ever created was disposable diapers.
Please, don't even get me there. We would go to the beaches over there, and people would just leave the diapers on the beach or throw them in the ocean. And then you see the turtles, the loggerheads and stuff, or the Ames.
And they're tangled in it.
Having this crap out. It was sad. It really was.
It is. It's heartbreaking, and this is human nature. We are only interested in what makes it easy for us, and we never think of the ramifications of our actions. I'm going to ask you gentlemen to talk about, because this it leads me into space debris. I have this theory, and I know I'm not anywhere where you guys are, but to me, if you have a can of Pepsi and you hold it up above your head, you'll see how much ground it covers, that it blocks the sun, Yep. Now, we're getting as disgusting in space as we are here. We got a bunch of crap floating around up there. And I look at it and think, how much of the sun is being blocked by all this crap floating around? And in 300 years, what's going to be up there? I mean, we're going to have spaceships that are dumped up there, floating around in the air, up in the atmosphere. Yeah, really. A spaceship,
Yeah, according to, that was intended to be covered under the space treaty, okay? But the treaty was never ratified, and that portion of the treaty whereby the persons responsible for the launch are responsible for its demise. Okay, it's called end of life. Okay, and thanks for bringing this up, Mo. By the way, the FAA, anytime somebody puts one of these, used to call them birds, when they put a rocket up, they have to have a complete plan that is mission compliant, that specifies end of life. End of life. What happens to that thing after the mission has been undertaken, accomplished? What happens to the debris in space? Before the FAA will grant that launch permit, they have to have this in place. Now, there's no regular. All the requirement is that they have to have it in place. They don't have to follow up on it, but they have to have it in place. So what ends up happening is that you'll have these companies launch stuff into space, and I don't even want to talk about microbots yet and mini-sats. And you're the one who brought up the fact of all the space debris up there. Part of the paper that I published that dealt with space debris cleanup at the ISDC spoke to the phenomenon that I named, that I call the umbrella effect. Now, you've got, just like you said, hold a can up over your head, or go outside and hold an umbrella over your head.
Exactly.
Move that umbrella closer to the sun. The closer you get to the sun, the broader the coverage becomes on that umbrella.
Right.
And the greater the diffraction becomes. Now, imagine having 60 million pieces of this space debris out there orbiting at different levels, each piece being roughly the size of a softball, some as large as a school bus, navigating the planet.
Right.
Now, you wonder why portions of the Amazon are dying out. Well, just for example, if we take and collectively would put together, piece by piece, these 90 million pieces of material that are floating on, it's roughly the size of Brazil.
Right.
Isn't that scary?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's not me saying that. That's NASA saying that.
Right.
Yeah, shading and the umbrella effect. So think what happens. If you take a plastic tarp out and throw it over your lawn and wait for 2 days, what happens? Your grass dies.
Grass dies.
That's exactly what's happening to large amounts of the planet.
Right.
It's not noticeable right away, but over time, definitely noticeable. The encroachment of the Gobi Desert, for example, is going to 6,000 acres a year? So something's happening on this planet that's causing that. Part of that is attributable to the shading and the umbrella effect as a result of space debris. I even went so far, I'm such a big believer in this thing because, it's hard to hide from the data sets. John and I are these sort of, scientific egghead type guys, along with Lear and a couple of our other guys. It's hard to hide from the data. When you look at the data sets and you see what really is, and the people who are behind the data sets are absolutely bona fide, pure rote scientists that don't make stuff up, and it's hard to deny what's really going on the planet. And it's scary. I reached out to Charles Hall. I don't know if your readers know who Charles Hall is. Well, Charles has a series of books where he claims that he was in the U.S. Air Force and that he was the weatherman at the Area 51, Area S1, Area S4, which only people who have requisite classifications would even know them by that name, that he had contact with extraterrestrial beings that he called tall whites. And I've had conversation with him and his wife. I find him to be believable. I don't think this guy would make it up. I've read his work. I've read Hall's theory, and his theory obtains. I did the math. His theory obtains. I contacted him and said, look, I want to reach these tall whites because I want to rent a spaceship from them to clean the space debris. And he sort of got a chuckle out of it. And he said, well, Joe, they might go for it, but you have to tell them what's in it for them.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, here's what I told them. What's in it for them is avoidance of stuff like what happened at Roswell. It goes back that far. Now, according to Hall, according to my understanding of the recollection with Mr. Hall, so don't quote me, and I'm not putting words in Charles Hall, there was some thought that the crash of those particular craft was promulgated by incidents and occurrence of space debris.
Yeah, because we were shooting crappy missiles up into the air like there's no tomorrow.
Right. So if that's the case, then the vested interest that the tall whites and other off-planet entities, if they exist, would have in coming into and out of our atmosphere is to avoid, a collision event that was, devastating. So I went so far, and I have a copy of the letter. I wrote a letter to, and he called the leader of this embassy. Apparently there's an embassy out there at the northern rim of Area 51, S4, S1, whatever you want to call it. And I wrote a letter and sent it to Nellis Air Force Base to the person at the weather observer. That was Charles Hall, was a weather observer, and that person who's a weather observer has complete unrestricted access and clearance to go anywhere on that base and unaccompanied, and can do anything anytime that he or she wants to do. And that was the position that Hall held. And based on what he revealed to me, I sent a letter. Guess what? The letter never came back. Somebody got that letter.
Right.
No one's ever contacted me. I mean, I haven't had any, suits come up to the door and say, asking me why I wrote the letter. Well, I freely admit I wrote the letter because if UFOs exist, and if we can get one, and if their hyperdynamics in their flight capabilities are what others say they are, not what I say they are, but what other people say they are, I'd like to have one or two of them for about 2 weeks and clean up all the space debris. And that'd be the end of it, wouldn't it?
It reminds me, I think humanity is never going to stop or wake up or slow down to watch what they're doing until a big robot comes out of space, stops everything like the day the Earth stood still and says, we don't care what you do here, but you do it out there, we're going to blow you to smithereens. We're just going to take you out. And then maybe, because I'm seeing the next generations come up, and they're oblivious to what's actually happening. Their noses are in texting and phones and anime and TV shows. They think The Walking Dead is real, but they don't understand our water is completely destroyed. Our ground with fracking, we're destroying everything. They don't see the damage we're doing as long as that goddamn phone still lights up and works.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say good night. All right, it's fun talking to y'all.
Thank you so much for calling in, John.
Good hearing your voice. Thanks for joining. Hey, just let me digress for 1 second here, John, while I've got you on. Just to mention to the listeners, the material that John and I and UMRL and Team Rock and and all of our associates work with. That is public domain information, and as a United States citizen, each and every one of you have the right to use that information any way you see fit. Only American citizens. Foreigners can't use it. Foreigners can't use our stuff. Only American citizens. You're free to use those maps. If you want to make your own maps and start doing business, or God bless you, go do it. Space is big enough for everybody. We welcome everybody. And if you don't do it, someone else is going to. There's lots of money to be made. Space commerce, space is big enough for everybody. And with that, John, I give you my salute and thank you for calling in.
Well,
thank you, John.
Very much. Thank you, Mo. And Joe, tell Joy I said hi.
She's right here.
Yes, thank you, John.
All righty.
All right.
Okay.
Great call.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yeah. John is a real interesting guy, and
yeah, I know. We tried to get him on, but he got cold feet on me.
Yeah. Well, he really is. He was. I can't go into depth and scope of his, his background. But I can tell you, he's got over 30 years of service with one of the most elite DoD components that exists. And
I want you guys to tell everybody because we're down to 7 minutes. Give them Joy. Give them all the links that they need to find you guys.
Okay. Okay. We'll post that on your. I posted something earlier on your website.
But this is going on YouTube, and they have to hear it.
Yeah,
www.rmannco.com. That's www.rmanco.com.
And from rmanco.com, you can find all of our other links at the top of the page. It's pretty busy up there.
The R is for Resnick, and MANN is man.
That's Joy.
And then CO is all of our colleagues.
Yeah,
we're
a company of cohorts.
Yeah.
Okay, and the Carolina
Carolina
Bee Food Company.
Carolina Bee Food Company.
At
Weebly.com.
And that's off of the Armanco
site. They're all accessible right off of the Armanco site. All the links are there. They're all active. They're all good. And, we're real easy to contact. And if anybody has any questions, just shoot us an email. We do get lots of email. For example, just before I went on, I have over 600 emails that I need to, wade through here in the next, before I fall asleep tonight. And that's just today. When I wake up tomorrow, there'll be another 400. But I'm responsive. I answer each and every one of the emails from people, and we welcome inquiries. And we're delighted to have been your guest tonight, Mo. And we want to comment. Joy and I have been tracking, your personal dealings, Teddy, and just we want to praise you for being such a good buddy to your husband, and just being just such a tremendous asset to the community at large. You are a credit to humanity, and we're proud to call you our friend.
Thank you. I'm trying to leave the world a little bit better than it is, and if I can just get one person to listen, maybe they can get one person to listen, and you know what I'm saying, the chain, let's just get some people to listen and think about things.
Let me just jump in here real quick.
Yeah.
I invented this one speech device, and there was no market for it. The people who get laryngocarcinoma in the world, there's only about 77,000 cases per year. But I went through all this work, and I developed this miraculous little machine that's the size of a tooth that enables a person who's aphonic, can't produce speech or has laryngocarcinoma, to talk. But guess what? The industry said it doesn't warrant investment. But guess what I said? Guess what I said? I said, if I can save one person, to me, it's worth it. And
that's it.
And we saved hundreds of people and did our research at Ioneer Hospital, University of Pittsburgh, developed the technology, had all kind of great patients and stuff. And but in line with what you're saying, even if you help one person, it's worth it. It is worth it. It's worth it. Saving the one person is worth it. All people are deserving of salvation, in my opinion.
Yep.
So,
I can't thank you guys enough. And Joy, it was wonderful to have you on tonight. Whipping them and making sure you get everything out that we didn't get out. You're just a sweetheart, and I can't thank you enough for being on tonight.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. It's an honor.
It was a pleasure for me too, Mo. God bless everybody. I want to
God
say
bless
hi
you too.
And say hi to all my friends across the world. I send everybody 88s from Dr. Joe in Colorado Mountains. 88 is a sign-off for I love you, you'll miss you, you're my buddy. God bless you.
Yeah, and God bless you too also. And with that, all you got to do is hang up, and I'll close out the show.
All right.
I hope she's going to play another Fred Astaire.
Yeah.
I'm going to try.
Joy and I will dance.
Okay.
Right. Good night, Mo. Thank you.
Okay. That was wonderful. Yes, I am going to try to play one more Fred Astaire, Cheek to Cheek. Actually, let's see. I'll play Cheek to Cheek, okay? And then I'll close out the show. And this will be on YouTube tomorrow without the music because YouTube gets down on me if I do anything like that, put music on it. So this is Fred Astaire. It would have been his birthday, Cheek to Cheek.
Where over the rainbow birds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow while
Thank you for visiting me at my lair. And God bless you and yours.
Honey using the stingless bee. And it has since blossomed over the last couple of years where it is now an industry. And I got to tell you, I'll be honest with you, the finest honey I've ever tasted, and when I use my Brix index meter, the best honey that I've ever found on the face of the planet, and one of my big things is I take this Brix meter with me everywhere, and if there's honey around, I check the honey to check for moisture content, sugar, salinity, 5 different parameters. Yeah. The best honey in the world, Borneo. I'll tell you why. No pesticides. Yeah. No pesticides of any kind. First of all, it's so remote there, the only way to get there is by boat, okay? Or else they fly over and they push you out of the airplane with a parachute on, literally. And that's how you get there. So there's no pollution. And very few people. I mean, you have the indigenous populations there, and you have the Orang Asli populations there who are indigenous peoples, but you don't have the contamination that the foreign manufacturers are bringing in. So, consequently, the agricultural products coming out of there are absolutely pristine.
Let me interrupt for a second. I have a saying, and it annoys my family. I said, but we shit in our own bed. We have used pesticides without considering, it gets rid of mosquitoes, but it also kills bees. It makes birds sick, so they can't lay eggs. Pesticides are killing us, but we don't see it because we don't see the littlest, the first in line that get killed, and that's insects.
The pollinators.
The pollinators.
Right.
We're very big on pollinators. Joy is a champion of the pollinators. And Joy, chime in on this. You're saying is what? We rescue the pollinators, or we rescue the bees.
Yeah, we rescue the honeybees. You know, people say save the bees, save the bees. Well, we're more rescue.
Yeah, we're more into rescuing them because people saving them has not worked. So our approach, we developed a little bee box that we're trying to make available.
Welcome to Mo Banshee's Lair. This show has been altered to conform with YouTube's rules on copyright. The music has been removed in some of the commercials. I hope you enjoy it, and God bless you and yours.
Toto? I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Welcome to Mo Banshee's Lair, rocking your world on DreamStreamRadio.com.
And welcome to Mo Banshee's Lair. Tonight we have a good friend of mine, Dr. Joseph Resnick. He is a scientist. He is an amazing man. I opened our show with Something's Gotta Give by Fred Astaire because today is Fred Astaire's birthday. He passed away in 1987, but the guy was some hoofer. And I picked his music tonight because, growing up, that's who Gene Kelly, all of these guys, we watched them on the $1 Million Movie and everything else. We grew up with these guys. And a tip of the hat tonight to Fred Astaire. One of my favorite books was War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. And then, of course, the movie with Anne Robinson. And hi, Anne, I love you, came out, the movie, and Earth was almost destroyed. The extraterrestrials come and they beat us down and almost have us whipped. And this tiny, tiny little germ comes around and kills the bad guys, the extraterrestrials, and all is well. Well, that's a make-up. In the Irish, it's in make-up. It's not true. It was something H.G. Wells envisioned. It was a story he created in his head. But we are very much in that battle right now. And our only recourse, the only thing that might save us is a tiny, tiny little insect. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to be talking about Bigfoot, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff tonight, because tonight our guest is Joe Resnick. Welcome to my lair.
Good evening, Mo. Thank you so much for having me on as your guest this evening. Joining me will be my partner, my business associate and research associate, Miss Joy Mann. And
hi,
we
Joy.
have lots to tell about the bees, our research, our transition from the tropics to from the island of Borneo, Madagascar, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, and we brought that research back here to the United States, and we're adapting that now to the mellifera, which is a common name for the honeybee that everybody recognizes as the European honeybee, which is not native to the United States, by the way.
It's not indigenous, no.
No, it is not. They were brought here by Sir Francis Drake, first known by Sir Francis Drake. However, there is a body of evidence that suggests that the Spaniards brought them here, but not the European bee. The Spaniards brought tropical bees. So there's a whole body of evidence. But I guess I wanted to start tonight, again, by thanking you, Mo, for having us on the show tonight and presenting us the opportunity to tell you about our research, about our company, our Manco, RMANNCO.com, that your listeners can go and there's a whole bunch of links on there that talk about the Carolina Bee Food Company, which is a brand new entity. And here's something, Mo, this was hard for me to believe. When we set up the Carolina Bee Food Company last year, in the whole history of North Carolina, there's never been anybody that makes bee food in North Carolina. And North Carolina prides itself on its honey. This is one of the largest honey-producing states in the United States, if not in the world. Some of the finest honey comes right here from North Carolina, and they're real sticklers about it. I mean, these guys from the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, I mean, they're real sticklers about it.
Right.
And they work very closely with the Department of Agriculture, USDA. I got a bunch of clocks here that are going to go off. I apologize.
Yeah.
I'm a clock freak. I like to know.
I know. I wanted to talk about that later.
Yeah. Well, I like to know what time it is in different places where we have research projects going on, and I have each one of the 23 different chime clocks set to go off at different intervals so that I know what's happening at this particular place and that particular. It's just one of these little nuances about me that people tolerate. But
you mean Joy?
And others. We have a lot of people that come in and out, and my partners, when I'm on the phone, always on the hour, I have to stop everybody and say, "Excuse me for 30 seconds," and then all the clocks go off, and it sounds like the Swiss Time Museum in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland. They all go off at one time. It's beautiful, really beautiful.
Yeah.
But we launched the Carolina Bee Food Company, and our first product is being tested by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and labeled. We call that Grex Bee Food, and that's actually a spin-off of the artificial pollen product that we developed when we were in Malaysia. Prior to going to Malaysia, we made a synthetic pollen that is 10 microns in size with the encapsulation instrument I developed when I was working for NASA as part of the STS-41, STS-43 schemes and programs back in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And we took a batch of that over, and we knew we were going to be there during the monsoon season. Now, imagine, if you would, the monsoon season is equivalent to our winter time here, where forage for the animals, for bees, it's very, very scarce, if existent, if at all extant. So what we did, we planned particularly to be there in Borneo, in Sumatra, and in Malaysia and in Indonesia during those time periods, so that we could actually use our product and see how these bees would uptake these very, very small bees. I actually worked with 5 different species. There are over 66 different species that we know about, probably more, that have been identified there in Southeast Asia. There are over 66 species. We worked with 5 of them. 2 of the 5 were very aggressive. 3 of the 5 were very, very docile. So we selected those three species to domesticate. So we actually started a program there in Indonesia, in China, and in Malaysia to create infrastructure that dealt strictly with production of to the U.S. Department of Agriculture and to the fisheries and game people, where we provide a small box with our bee food in it, discounted rate, of course, okay? And our hope is that they would put these bee boxes for all pollen, and our bee food can be used by all pollinators, and pollinators include ants, bats. I don't know if you know bats are pollinators. Flies.
Hummingbees are pollinators.
Yeah. Well,
hummingbirds.
Moths. Butterflies. Just about anything that moves from plant to plant can be considered a pollinator. Well, one of the projects that we have is to make these little bee boxes, and we call it Bee Feed ER, which is the bee food emergency room that we want to put out there in all of the national parks, in all of the cities and counties. And of course, we make them out of paper, so they're very inexpensive, about 7 cents a piece. And our bee food is very inexpensive. A pound of our bee food, of course, it's depending on the cost of beeswax. Our bee food is made with beeswax, and we take the beeswax and we make microscopic-sized balls out of the beeswax, and then we put our artificial nectar and pollen mixture inside this microscopic little ball. The ball can range in size from 10 microns all the way up to 500 microns, whatever size we want to make it. Generally, we stick between 10 microns and 25 microns, and that's because it's easier for the bees to handle. You know, one of the things, I'll just share this with you. We went to a bee meeting, and I'm not going to say where or who was present, But these were the honchos in the bee world, beekeeping world. And I queried one of the guys, chairing the seminar about the size of the jaw on the honeybee. And he said, well, quite frankly, I don't know. And this guy is, Professor Emeritus.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I know what it is. He said, well, quite frankly, we never had anybody inquire or never had a need to know. And I said, well, I had a need to know because I needed to know how far their jaws could spread so that they could bite this little ball and release the nectar inside. But, that was quite...